and I'm delighted to be here at the Anglonordic Life Science Conference by Zoom. Today, I want to give a short talk on my personal perspective of what we did at the Vaccine Taskforce, how we tackled the challenges and brought parties together in what was a triumph of science and global collaboration. So if I take you way back, on May the 5th, I had a text from Matt Hancock during one of the expert advisory group meetings that I joined to support the Vaccine Taskforce as it then was set up within the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, asking if I could speak. So I spoke to him and was quite startled by the request and thought about this for 24 hours, following which I had a text and then a phone call from the Prime Minister. And at that point, I agreed that I would take the role of chair, but I was very anxious to ensure that they understood that it was going to be highly challenging to develop any successful and safe vaccine against SARS-CoV-2. And the reasons I gave the Prime Minister, which were well understood at the time, was that no vaccine had ever been successfully developed for any human coronavirus. We didn't understand the virus itself. Obviously, viruses mutate, and that the most advanced vaccine formats, the mRNA and the adenoviral vector vaccines, had never been approved by regulators. So we had lots of reasons to be concerned about whether or not this would work. And it was a highly personally daunting task to take this on with the expectation that we would get vaccines that would start protecting people. So until that point, the quickest time that a vaccine had ever been developed, in fact, was for measles. And in that case, the disease was identified and understood in 1953, but the vaccine was not licensed in the US for 10 years until 1963. So we had a very clear need to speed up what we were doing. So when the Prime Minister spoke to me, he set a very clear goal, which was to vaccinate the appropriate UK population against COVID-19 as soon as possible, obviously to save lives and to restore economic growth. And the key point he made was we need to do this quickly. It doesn't have to be perfect, but speed is of the essence because people are dying. So the three specific goals he gave me, one was to secure vaccines for the UK. The second was to ensure that any successful vaccine was distributed internationally to all those who needed it. And the third was to put plans in place so that we were better prepared for next time. So in the previous discussions with the expert advisory group, I had asked what the likelihood was that any vaccine might be successful against SARS-CoV-2. And I was told by people who are eminent and expert in this area that it was probably a 15% chance, maybe 20, that any vaccine currently in the clinic could be successful, but that those vaccines that were not in the clinic were probably less likely to succeed. So we knew right at the beginning we were going to have to build a portfolio. And the way we did that was to recruit industry specialists and experts who understood every aspect of vaccine discovery, preclinical, clinical development, manufacturing, regulatory, all the different aspects. And we embedded that team of experts together with a team of government experts in deployment, project management, international collaboration, and commercial negotiation. And I think it was actually that combination of experts plus government that worked well. So we had three different stages of the Vaccine Task Force last year. From the early May through to the end of June, we basically used that period to set up and plan what we were doing. So we assembled the team and the experts that we were going to use for all aspects of due diligence, triage, support, and so on. We defined the strategy for the three goals that the Prime Minister had set. And within the first 2 months, we actually prioritized the portfolio of vaccines that we sought to procure. During, again, that first 2-month period, we also agreed a process and ring-fenced budget with the government so that we had a very clear, streamlined way of making decisions. And we actually started expanding the capacity of manufacturing in the UK, and issued a term sheet to acquire a new veterinary vaccine manufacturing plant. So that was the first stage. And actually, even in June, we started working with the Department of Health, who were starting their deployment planning activities as well. The second stage was really about scoping and completing the diligence and terms of how we were going to work with the different vaccine companies. So very crudely, the smaller companies needed a lot more support on clinical trial support, scale up, manufacturing and fill finish than the big companies. So we scoped out what we could do to support those vaccine companies to enable them to come and both manufacture and potentially run their clinical trials here in the UK. And we also launched for the first time a national NHS registry of clinical trial volunteers so that we could expedite the execution of clinical trials, which was important. And then the final 3 or 4 months was all about execution. So converting those heads of terms that we had signed with the vaccine companies to full legal supply contracts. It was to actually execute on the clinical trials, to actually continue supporting the scale up and manufacturing of the different vaccines. And actually at that point we started the human challenge procedure and planning so that we could build in that capability as well. So what we ended up building was a portfolio which was diverse across different types of vaccine format and different types of risk. So the most advanced vaccines were the adenoviral and the mRNA vaccines. But again, those were the ones about which we knew the least. And then we almost bookended the portfolio risk, as it were, with adjuvanted protein-based vaccines and inactivated whole viral-based vaccines. So those ones were better understood in terms of the format, but they were obviously much later to actually complete the clinical development and get to regulatory approval. And in fact, we have no approved adjuvanted protein vaccines yet, or the vaccine from Valneva, which is the whole viral-based vaccine. Yet we do now have approved BioNTech, Moderna, Oxford, and Janssen vaccines. So that was the basis of which we built the portfolio. And then we also recognized that there are some people who are highly immunocompromised who are not able to respond to a vaccine. So we signed again a heads of terms with AstraZeneca's long-acting antibody cocktail to act as potential prophylactic protection for those immunocompromised individuals, patients. So broadly speaking, we spent about £900 million up front to secure rights to those different vaccines. That was used to basically fund manufacturing at risk before we knew whether or not the vaccines would prove to be safe and effective, as well as to fund the clinical trials of those vaccines to demonstrate whether or not they were safe and effective. And overall, we were spending a little over £10 a dose, recognizing again that most of the vaccines required 2 doses. So the two aspects of our activity once or in parallel with securing the portfolio itself. The first was around manufacturing the vaccines, because we were very anxious where possible to bring manufacturing onshore so that we could manage the scale up and bulk manufacturing ourselves. And so we did a bunch of things. We basically supercharged the existing vibrant specialist UK bioprocessing industry. So companies like Oxford Biomedica, Cobra Biologics, Wockhardt, and so on, we worked very closely with to enable them to scale up to get from clinical batch size up to full population scale. We expanded VMIC, which is the Vaccines Manufacturing and Innovation Centre, and we bought this veterinary plant, which is being used, will be used for manufacture of mRNA vaccines. And we also upgraded the Valneva plant up in Scotland so that we could actually grow up the pandemic virus in the right containment facilities to enable that to be another form of vaccine for the UK. So we did a lot with what was a very strong existing base, but we massively scaled it up in capacity. And then on the clinical side, as I mentioned, we launched the NHS registry, which was the first time that's been done. And what was important for us was to actually have sufficient numbers that we could run the trials very rapidly and that recruitment would not be a rate limiting factor. And we are a little under 500,000 people that have signed up to that registry, of which I'm pleased to say over a third are elderly. So over a third of that 500,000 are now over the age of 60. And that was really important because we want to ensure that those people most at risk to infection would be responsive to the vaccines that we were trialing. So that was something that enabled us to, for example, start and finish the Novavax phase 3 trial before the US even started their phase 3. So that has been not only a game-changing registry that has helped accelerate the clinical trials here in the UK, but I would hope will remain a lasting legacy, which I would love to see expanded into therapeutics too, so that any person, any patient that receives a diagnosis is then able to register and explore to see what trials they may in due course want to participate in. I've mentioned we also set up and funded human challenge studies. So this is deliberate infection of young healthy volunteers to understand how the virus actually infects and what the correlates of protection are that are provided by vaccines. And we also funded Porton Down and Oxford Immunotech to develop really standardized assays to give us very rich immunological readouts so that we could compare the different vaccines to each other, because that was not something that was consistently done across the different vaccine companies. I don't think I need to repeat how well the vaccination program has gone. We've seen a dramatic reduction in deaths following the outstanding rollout that has been handled by the Department of Health. And I have to say the JCVI, so the vaccine expert group that advises the government, has been shown to be correct in all their calls, delaying the second dose to improve the immune response and to expand the number of people that could be protected, and also to focus very strictly on those most at risk, so the over 80s first and then coming down. So for today, I thought it would be quite interesting to talk a little bit about, well, why did it work? Because it's not always that the UK comes out doing so well in a complicated activity that needs to be done quickly. And I think one of the aspects is that our whole team had what I call a venture capital mindset, which is actually very similar to a biotech mindset, whereby we work together as partners rather than adversaries. We're much more interested in finding out how we can support each other to succeed, rather than to focus just on price or process of doing things. So we were very lucky that the government was willing to accept risk and to accept the fact that it was likely that many of our vaccines would fail and therefore we would lose money. That, I think, was a game-changing decision, and the support from the government from that perspective, I think, was unusual, but also outstanding. By building the portfolio approach, that's exactly how we manage, as a venture capitalist industry, how we manage our portfolio, because we do accept that we're going to have losses, and therefore we want to make sure that we can absolutely back our winners, and those ones that can succeed, we want to make sure they do succeed. So we want to be, as a venture capitalist, I want to be a value-added investor. As a chair of the Vaccine Taskforce for the UK, we want to make sure we were a value-added buyer, where again, we could support those vaccine companies coming to the UK. And to do that, we needed to have experts, we needed to have the right amount of funding at the right time to support whatever activities were needed, and we needed to execute flawlessly and quickly. So I think that whole mindset was important, but we mustn't forget that we started with a very well-funded and cooperative and specialist industrial and academic base in the UK, which has been funded for a long time and is highly cooperative. And what was really interesting, again, was the fact that several of the pharmaceutical companies were operating at a non-profit basis. So we're not seeking to profiteer in any way from these vaccines or from the pandemic. And I have to say, that was a real privilege to work with companies that have that sort of mindset. I think the mandate from the Prime Minister, which was speed over perfection, was really important. And again, I have to absolutely credit Sir Patrick Vallance for creating or coming up with the idea of having a vaccine task force in the first place, which was an empowered expert team that allowed us to actually get on and identify, prioritize, and secure the vaccines and everything that was needed to manufacture and get those regulated. So having experts embedded in government worked. And then again, the other very interesting thing was that we were able to create a very streamlined approach for decision making. So I did not have any spending authority. All we did was to basically put together the very detailed proposals for which vaccines we wanted, or which manufacturing plants we wanted to buy, or which, the clinical trial support, such as the registry. And we presented those proposals to a ministerial investment committee, which was made up of the secretaries of state from health, business, cabinet office, and treasury. And if we needed to have them meet and make a decision on a Friday night, that's what they did. And so again, that was a huge surprise to me, that government could absolutely jump very quickly if needed to get quick decisions. And then the last surprise to me, which again is brilliant and one that I hope endures, is the way that June Rain led the MHRA. So it was completely different from what I'd expected and what I'd previously sort of understood regulators to do and to be. So in this case, the MHRA basically rewrote the rules such that they encouraged early rolling reviews with the vaccine companies, where they shared incomplete data and where the MHRA could advise, support, direct, to such that when the dossier was then complete, 95% of it would already have been reviewed and assessed, so they would be able to get to a quick decision. And that, for me, was something that was really important, because there was no reason why any regulator in the world could not have approved the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine first, and yet it was the MHRA that approved that and allowed us. They approved it on the 2nd of December and allowed us to start vaccinating, as we all remember, on the 8th of December, which was completely triumphant. So I'm hugely optimistic about some of the changes that we've seen in the UK and the broad willingness to collaborate globally to support all those people who need it. And I welcome the continued dialogue and work that we've put in place to ensure that the best of what we were able to achieve with the vaccines will remain, and support, whether it's vaccine or therapeutic development, so that we can continue to work for the benefit of patients. Thank you very much.